So what's the first one? Jesus goes into the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights he fasts, and then the devil meets him. And where do we get stuck? I propose we're already stuck in this story. We're fighting over whether we should fast or not. We're already stuck. We haven't even met the enemy. We've just decided that this is where we'll base our theology. And this is killing us, man. This whole idea that every time we turn around, we can't see the forest for the trees a lot of times. We can't just watch what Jesus does. We always have to argue our way into a way for us to do. Jesus is going to give you the work to respond to chaos. But please just watch him set the story. The 40 days of fasting for Jesus is a microcosm of Israel in the wilderness for 40 years. Jesus must fast 40 days. He's the last Israel. He can't fast 40 years. He's dead. So metaphorically, he fasts 40 days. What happens after they cross the Red Sea? They spend 40 years in the wilderness. Paul says in Corinthians they were baptized into Moses and then went into the wilderness. Jesus taps John on the shoulder and goes, "You've got to baptize me." And John goes, "No, I'm not going to baptize you." And Jesus says, "You've got to baptize me. We have to get this thing done. When I come up out of this water, Dad's going to say something about me like he did in Genesis 1. Very good. And then he's going to push me into a walled-off garden. I've got to go face the snake, and I've got to go face the tree, but I've got to do it as the new Israel. So I'm going to be a microcosm of Israel. They went 40 years in the wilderness. We don't have that kind of time. I'm going to go 40 days in the wilderness. And I'm going to be completely dependent on my Father for food. And I'm not telling you that's what you need to do, is fast to get it. Skip that part of the story and go face the chaos, because you have chaos in your house. You have chaos in your kids. You have chaos in your wallet. You have chaos in your mind. So whenever you face this chaos, watch how to handle it. Never forget you're God's kid, and never forget what Daddy said. Those are two things Jesus does. But watch the individual thing. The enemy comes to Jesus and says, "If you are the Son of God, turn these stones to bread." Now, I don't want to praise the enemy, but I got to give him a little bit of credit. This is slick. He knows a few things about what Jesus is going to do. Jesus is going to be a multiplier. His first miracle out of the gate in John 2 is what? Water wine. What's his most popular miracle? All four Gospels tell you about feeding of the 5,000. He's a multiplier. He takes your lunch and he feeds a nation. He takes your water and he feeds a wedding party. He's good at it. It's easy. So the enemy comes to him and says, "Get started. I know this is your gift. You're good at this. You may not be yet, but you're going to be. Take this stone, turn it into bread. If you are really the Son of God." First challenge of the enemy is always to question your identity. Are you really one of the sons of God? And he'll do that through condemnation. Stuff like, don't you think one of the sons of God would have said this? Don't you think if you were really one of the sons of God, you wouldn't have done that? Don't you think if you were really who you act like you are when you go to church, you'd do better than this? That's a trick of the enemy. He loves to play with your sonship, to monkey with it. If you give it to him, he'll beat you to death with it. Okay? If you give in, I don't know today, I don't know if I'm one of Dad's kids or not, he'll run right over you. You can call it grace all day long. You need to know who you are. All right? You need an identity. Not what I do, who I am. That's step one. Don't ever lose it. The other step is don't forget that what Dad says is what goes. So Jesus never confronts the enemy in the wilderness without "it is written." So he knows what Dad has written. I don't want to worry so much right now about what Jesus said was written. I want to show you why these were great temptations. Now, the first one seems obvious. If you're starving and it's been 40 days since you ate, and there's a rock, and all you got to do is turn it into bread, and you've got the gift, I mean, who's going to know, right? Why not? This is something we sometimes forget about Jesus. Jesus knew who he was, he knew what his timing was, and he knew how to follow the Holy Spirit. And Jesus, this is, for me, one of the most important moments of overcoming chaos in the life of Jesus. Jesus teaches you a lesson. Never sacrifice your long-term inheritance for temporary gain. We live in a chaotic world because we have people who are constantly sacrificing their long-term happiness, joy, and peace for a short-term, momentary gain. They sacrifice the beauty of their covenant with their future spouse so they can have sex. They sacrifice their health and their sanity so they can get high. It happens in so many categories of life where man faces his chaos and takes a shortcut to temporarily satiate his desire. And when he comes out of that, his life is darker than when he went in, every time. I didn't say it wasn't fun to turn the rock into bread. I didn't say it wasn't fun to eat the bread. But Jesus hasn't heard his Father. Dad has never said, turn rocks to bread. When Jesus gets to the wedding, after the wilderness, at Cana, remember that? And mom says they're out of wine, and Jesus says, woman, what's that got to do with me? Where does he get the authority to do that? He just stared the enemy down in the wilderness and told him the same thing. I don't respond to your dictates. I don't try to go fulfill temporary pleasure and sacrifice long-term reward. I don't care if they all want wine. Until Dad says turn water to wine, I'm going to sit right here. He's got his lessons down. He knows how to make his world a better place by waiting on the voice of his Father. And he also knows that if you trade long-term security for temporary reward, you end up like Esau the fornicator, which is what the book of Hebrews says. Esau traded his inheritance for a bowl of soup. You see, the Bible keeps repeating these stories as it goes because it's trying to get thick-headed people like us to pay attention to how to beat chaos. Stop facing hard moments in your life and making cheap choices. That's the general rule. Jesus says, here's how you should do it. You're going to face an enemy who's going to offer you a temporary gratification. And you can have it if you want to. It'll taste good. But you'll have to stop being a son to do it. And if you're willing to do that trade-off, by all means go for it. Here's how Paul interprets it. 1 Corinthians 6. He says, Christians suing Christians, sleeping with temple prostitutes. He says, all things are lawful. You can do whatever you want. But not all things will build you up. It was Paul's way of saying, you can face the chaos and give in. You can do whatever you want to do. Just do whatever you want to do. Blame it on grace. You have that right. Did you know you are in the law of liberty? You are not in the law of Moses. James says you are in the law of liberty. Wow. Did you know what that word liberty means in the Greek? License. Oh, I know our grace detractors really get nervous right here. They go, see, I knew they were teaching a license to sin. You didn't need a license to sin. You were good at that before you ever knew that it was even wrong. You were good at doing it. You need a license. You need a license to live free. You have it. You have a license of liberty. You have a license to live free. But doing just any old thing, is that a good idea? Paul didn't think so. Genesis didn't think so. Jacob didn't think so. Esau didn't realize it. Hebrews comes back and says Esau sold his soul for a bowl of soup because he's a fornicator. It didn't mean because he sleeps around. It meant because he whored himself out to the moment. When you whore yourself out to temporary pleasure, the Bible calls you a fornicator. That's a toughie. Pastor, what grace people need to hear this for? Because the embodiment of grace walked into chaos, faced the devil, and had the opportunity to take temporary satisfaction and give up a long-term gain. And instead, he said, man doesn't live by bread alone. What did he mean by man doesn't live by bread alone? Did he mean you need bread and chicken and broccoli? Well, in the natural, maybe that's what he meant, because it would be a bad diet if all you ate was bread. It might taste good, but it probably wouldn't be good for you. What was Jesus saying? I need more than a momentary satisfaction. I will not live my life by making myself happy in the moment and sacrificing my long-term sanity. If you want to make your world a better place, start to face every moment of your life, not as a legal restriction. You have the license of God's grace to face this world exactly the way your Jesus did. But if you want to stop the chaos in your life, let's stop making decisions that help us in the now and sacrificing our futures.